Right, we'll get started. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I hope everyone will learn something on this PowerPoint. So here we go, let's get started. So I thought I'd start with just a little bit about who we are. So I work for Callison RTKL. We're a global architecture planning and design practice. We're owned by Arcadis, and we're their sort of our design consultancy arm, which is obviously a much bigger company. And we work mostly within the commercial, retail, healthcare and workplace. I mean, we're not as well known probably in the UK as we are in the US, for obvious reasons, because most of our offices are over there. But yeah, we've been kind of doing BIM technology since 2003. We started in Dallas in 2003. In the London office, we started in 2006, and I joined in 2007 with the whole role of pushing out Revit and pushing out the implementation of BIM tools. So, again, my name is Andrew Victory. I'm the Design Technology Manager, so I manage a team of design technology specialists which work across the globe, mostly in Shanghai in the US. And, you know, I have sort of 17 years experience in the AEC industry. I've got 9 years experience with BIM in a firm-wide kind of role. Oops, sorry. In a firm-wide kind of role. And I work within the Arcadis Global Engineering Group as well, and I'm part of the board that helps push BIM implementation from an engineering applications tools as well, and sort of give insight from that. So anyway, so that's me and what we do. And I thought I'd start by, so there's going to be kind of three sort of different chapters we're going to cover today. The first one is really, before anyone even starts talking about the tools they're going to use and what they want Revit to do for them on the project, there's certain things you need to start getting your head around at the beginning of the project. I mean, one of them is the BIM uses. You know, we're aligned to the Arcadis BIM uses, and Arcadis is aligned to the Penn State BIM uses, which is the US sort of academic institute that started with trying to define what BIM and Revit is being used for and the different ways that these are captured. And obviously everyone's business does things slightly differently, has slightly different needs for Revit and BIM and things like that. The top sort of five boxes at the top are how we've defined within Callison RTKL we use BIM. So, you know, we use it mostly for visualizations, and virtual reality is snuck in there in the last couple of years. 2D production is a big one, obviously, data management and analysis, 3D modeling and coordination, and also environmental analysis for some projects. Obviously, we have a team that know that stuff. I don't really know the environmental side, but the other four areas are very much within the group that I work with. You know, the thing I also like to talk about is standards on projects. You know, I don't know if anyone knows these sort of documents that came out in 2017. This specific one here is the lessons learned from Ireland in an Ireland document, and it's talking about the different mandates that are popping up across the globe. Ones that have been mandated, ones that are being worked on. And, you know, everyone sort of thinks that we're working to one standard, and obviously we're not. There's actually 123 different documents around the globe in terms of BIM standards. And once you get the PowerPoint slide, once all this AU is finished, there's links to those documents if you can't find them online yourself. But you know, you need to be aware of that. So don't, you know, what Revit and the standards that you use within your models might not be the same for every company, and might not be the same for every different consultant you work with. So you have to be aware of that. You know, there's also these kind of this pyramid standards where, you know, we're talking about ISO standards all the way down to company codes and practices and private standards that companies build for themselves. You know, the MBS report spoke about BS 1192 and, you know, how many people are using it in 2017. This is the 2017 report. And, you know, mainly I'm finding that we work within the public available standards or the private standards. Even when companies are aligning to a BS 1192 or a PAS 1192 workflow, they like to tweak it somewhat. And they tweak it because it might not relate to how they want that information integrated within their own systems. And so, you know, I think the MBS report kind of highlighted that for me, because it showed that only sort of 39 or 40% of people were using those standards in the UK. And bear in mind, this is a UK report, so, you know, most of the people lining up are from the UK that are signing into that survey. The other thing I bang on about within the company a lot is the McLeamy curve. So, you know, I don't know if everyone knows the McLeamy curve from Patrick McLeamy within the Building Smart group. But obviously it talks about the ability of impacts of costs and, you know, costs going up as the design changes, as the project gets further towards construction, and how, you know, the preferred design workflow and BIM wants you to work at the front end. And, you know, I'm probably telling this to everyone that's seen this thing before. But the things that I have to tell my project managers and directors often is, well, I ask them how long are they going to be on the project? Are they going to be on the project through all the stages? Are we only going to be on at the beginning? Are we only getting into it from the middle? You know, if we're going to be joining as a design delivery architect, for example, most of the first part of the design is done. We're just remodeling it to whatever requirements are next, be it for the contractor, be it for whatever that might be. Again, we might be getting novated to the general contractor. We've been working with them along the way, but it's very clear who's going to be the contractor. At that point, there is much more effort that we put in that is worth it because we'll get the returns back later. So, you know, we might only be on a framework agreement. You know, we might be only kind of defining for the client what he should be asking of his consultants along the supply chain. At which point, how much do we want to build the model? How much money have we asked to build the model that would be used as a template? So these are the things we kind of really, really try to get our heads around. And I know that sounds kind of harsh for, you know, the whole collaborative environment, but if we are going to want to pass information through all the stages, we need to know, are we going to be on them? If we're not, have they clearly defined what they want? And so forth. You know, there's also very different tools we use at all these different stages. You know, there's obviously Adobe tools in there, there's CAD, dare I say, there's Dynamo, and there's Rhino, and I have to say even SketchUp gets snuck in there, and people probably say SketchUp's not a BIM tool, and I get that. I totally get that. I know it's trying to get better with IFC and all that, but the reality is at front-end concept stage design, sometimes we need to work with that model in SketchUp in parallel to the model in Revit, and we have to work out a good process of passing over between one tool and the other. You know, I know we see Formit, and I know we have those sort of tools within Autodesk coming out, which are great. Our testing so far has shown for the scale of projects we work on, they're not quite there yet for the scale of project. And I'll show you some examples of why the scale of projects we work on and why it doesn't work for us yet. But it's got a lot of promise. The other thing I like to talk to the teams about is LOD. So, you know, especially if we're going to be shifting team members around, you know, shopping and entertainment district for us is basically shopping centres and retail malls and things like that across different regions. And their requirements for an LOD is quite different to what a hospitality and residential project might want or a commercial office might want. You know, shopping and entertainment, for example, usually has a strong focus on circulation routes, railings, you know, paving might be important, roof glazing, especially the public areas that are going to be shared. And often it's much more focused on the internal look of the building than it is on the outside of the building, whereas, you know, for other projects, it is not the same. You know, hospitality and residential, there's a strong focus on the interiors, on doors, windows, rooms, properties. You know, and so, again, this has to be kind of understood and captured. And, you know, stairs I've put there as 2 or 3 stars in terms of complexity for LOD, because it does depend. If there's no feature stairs, maybe it's a project that just has fire escape stairs everywhere, which is just precast concrete or concrete of some sort, compared to a very feature stair that's in a public area. Well, those are discussions that need to happen with the team. Everyone needs to know what the workflow will be specific to that element and how we're going to address that at the different stages. Well, that was the first stage. I hope I didn't rush through that too quickly for everyone. So next is distributed teams. So you saw earlier that, you know, we're a company that is distributed across the globe, 2,000 of us across the globe. So in London office, we only have 100. So obviously when we work on some large-scale projects, we need specialties from other offices to help and work together collaboratively. So because of that, for a long time now, pretty much since I started there, we had to work out how we were going to work from an IT perspective, from a workflow perspective with these other offices and how we're going to communicate and track that information. Just so you know, the ones I'm going to show you as well and I asked the IT manager in our office about this, so we're on a 100 meg line with 1 gig switches, okay? So I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone, but 100 meg line makes sense to me because of Virgin Broadband and stuff like that. Right, so on the very, very basic level, we have distributed teams where the central file for your project, on the left-hand side, for example, is, I'll stand over here for a minute as well. The central file on the left-hand side there is one office, and another office just literally goes to the model through the servers, goes to the folder, selects the file, and creates new local. It's as basic as, you know, as if they were looking in their own server. That's option 1. Option 2 might be that the models are linked. You've got 2 files. Maybe one team is doing interiors. Maybe one team is doing a hospitality section of a big tower. The shell and core of the building is going to be done by the main office. You know, again, there might be some linking going on there. But, you know, again, we're just relying purely on Revit there to kind of manage our need of tools for collaboration across offices. So the things to consider here, and I wanted to mention, is that the team, the location of that model shouldn't always be the location where who won the project. It should also be thought about in terms of offices. It should be thought about as in which office is going to be doing most of the work. Which building has the most complexity in it that needs the quickest synchronization, the less bumping into each other. So, it's not always about, people have to put their kind of, opinions on the side sometimes for these things and think of it from a logical perspective about where that model should be sat. Other ways we do it, another not so advanced way either, is remote desktop. For those of you that don't know remote desktop, it's a Windows software that sits on most machines, and it's literally as long as you know the number of the computer, you can connect up as long as some settings have been set to allow for it. And at that point, all you're doing is connecting to another office. So on that scenario, you've got a main office, the central file sits in that office, and then as long as in that office there are some machines that aren't being used and computers that aren't being used, then the users in any other office can remote desktop onto that machine and work away as if they were working in the file. So it's, so it's working within a kind. You can even do that with Skype and things like that in the past I've seen. There are things that need to be addressed with that though, such as, is the machine switched on? Has the person that sat next to the machine remembered to switch it on because you were going to work at night while no one's there? If there isn't, it's unlikely you're going to be able to physically switch on unless you know some really fancy IT wizardry. Is there going to be time zone support? And printing, linking, and exporting. That's one of the big problems we have with people forgetting that they're off working in another location and they hit print for 100 sheets. Not real, even if it's back to their own office, but it's doing this loop of going to the US for the data crunching and then coming all the way back, and then they're standing at the printer and they could be standing there for 4 or 5 hours, realistically, waiting for this thing to come out. So, the better options in that scenario is print to PDF locally on that machine you're on, and then do a cut and paste of those files to your own place. Those are the kind of little steps that people have to remember, especially at point of deadlines. The other way is through XenApp, Cisco XenApp, which is kind of something that's been in our sort of offices now for about 4 years, something like that. And what that is a server or a machine that's been made to look like a server where up to a series of people can connect to it and work off the file. So, all they'll need then is log on and user, and kind of they're working within this kind of virtual environment within the one machine. You've still got potential issues with memory on the machine if it's a very big project. You also need to have, if there's XenApps on more than one office, if more than one office has these things, again, that conversation has to happen with the teams to say, well, where is the file going to be hosted? Is it going to be on my London one? Is it going to be in Dallas? All those sort of things. And that environment doesn't get you out of the same issues with printing, linking, and exporting, okay? So it needs to be thought about, and the teams need to be educated on what they're trying to achieve. And these are the current things that we're doing at the moment. I'll start with the left-hand side. It's to do with, it's actually Panzora, it's Amazon Web Servers. Using the Azure environment, I'll probably get some of this wording wrong that I got from IT, using the Azure environment, using Panzora. And so basically it is a cloud-based solution. You're working within a virtual world in the cloud. It's expensive, it doesn't come cheap, and it can't be used for all your tools. So if you're thinking to shift the whole team to every single software they might use that we were talking about earlier, there are tools that can't be yet virtualized. Some Revit plugins, for example, can't be virtualized to work within this environment properly yet. Licensing can be an issue. Even Autodesk themselves at one point weren't that keen on us going to the XenApp one earlier because there wasn't always easy ways to capture licensing and how many people we've got logged on there and we're only getting charged for one person. I mean, the way that the machine, Autodesk, or the machine looked at it, it thought of it as just one user, but in fact we'd have maybe 15 people on there. So, it is, from a licensing perspective, all that testing that we did had to be done to allow it and see if that's the right way. The other one is collaboration for Revit, BIM 360 team, the stuff that we're hearing a lot. We've been really going with this thing since about October, November, and it has gone really, really well. Everyone's really happy. We're up to, my last count 2 weeks ago, we're up to 100 projects on there now. Not every project is still going. There are some of them were short-term projects, but They're very good. It's working very well in the sense of latency, in terms of hanging, you know, when someone clicks an object and stuff like that. There are some problems, though. So for a start, you know, managing of the users. So everyone sees the live data all the time, and all they need is an email address to get, you know, synced up to a project and logged into a project from any consultant. So, you know, the architect's sometimes not that keen on their structural guy seeing every single change as he hits sync, and the structural guy not that keen that he's having to, you know, chase his tail trying to fix your design workflow. So there's a structure that needs to happen there. Sometimes it's as easy as splitting files up and just linking and not reloading very often, or much more communication going on, more IM, more instant messaging. There is a cost. There is a cost at the moment. There's a monthly cost to the tool, so you know everyone has to be aware of that. If you're deciding to chuck a consultant on there, the consultant has to also be prepared to pay for his license of Revit C4R. If they're not going to be paying, you know, you can't offer to pay for it either as an Arcadis or CallisonRTKL employee. So that conversation has to happen. That's bigger. And the big one at the moment for me has been once you commit to one version of Revit for collaboration for Revit, the project sticks on that version whether you like it or not. What I mean by that is if halfway through you know, a couple of months in, you decide you're going to upgrade to 2017 from a 2016 project, you can't within that same project. You have to make a brand new project for the whole team to be able to see the files. It means that any admin that you did in terms of permissions, in terms of users you're adding, you're going to have to do it again. Any conversations that needed to happen. The good thing with that, though, is it does purge out a lot of users that weren't using it anyway, and they were just logged in. You know, there are sometimes projects on here that have 50 different users actually saying they're part of the project and need access to the project, but in reality, a good chunk of them aren't. Or they are just PMs that every so often have wanted to at least have access for a comfort but never actually been in there, you know? And so those are kind of conversations that need to happen. I mean, the tools are obviously moving and maturing at the same time. But again, we're really pleased with it. It takes IT out of the equation a lot of times. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that as in, it doesn't mean IT has to deal too much with other than login. And then potentially if they're paying for it, then, you know, that conversation as well. Right, so that brings us on to model strategies. How am I doing for time? Better rush through it. Okay. Right, the stuff I'm going to show here, I have no doubt, is controversial to some people. They might feel that no way, you're talking out your ass, sort of Andrew. That's not the way we would do it at all. But it's all comes down to comfort zone. It will come down to what's the easiest way for you to get all the team on board and them not feel that they're needing too much day-to-day support and easy to communicate changes. Okay, so I'll start with a biggie. This is a project, one of our projects, Ream Mall. It's a UAE shopping centre. 450 stores, I'll give you a bit of detail. 450 stores, 85 restaurants. We only work on our Middle Eastern projects from concept to detail design. And when I say we, I mean CallisonRTKL, because we're not registered to be able to follow the project on through full construction. Arcadis has pockets that, of course, they can. But from an architectural design perspective, we can only work up to a certain point, and then it goes to a local architect of record or someone else that's going to be taking it on, maybe an engineering company. So what's controversial about this one is, and this is kind of our bread and butter in London, we do loads of these. We're about, in the years I've been there, we've done about 20 of these type of projects. They're short term, they're 3 to 9 month kind of projects. We put it all in one model. And we work in one model all the way through the project. You know, when I go back to that idea that we're only on it for a certain time, unless the other architect of record has had an opinion on what he wants to do, the model is in one file. For those that are wondering what sort of size are we talking, 350 meg is kind of roughly the file size at the end, with a bit of cleaning up, error warnings down, things being dealt with. The only sort of caveat I put to that is topography, site models. Things like that we keep out of the file, often to do with because it's a pain, it shifts when you didn't want it to move, or you know, it's a CAD import, the topography, because we're working, or a civils import, or some sort of method of kind of workflow that we've gone through. It might be Rhino, it could be SketchUp, it could be all sorts. Because of that uncertainty, we often keep that site model separate. But the main model is about 350, and we're happy with that. There are teams in the US that that say they work in 1 gig files and they say it works like a dream. I mean, I'm still skeptical, but they chug through it and they seem to be happy enough with it. So I'm not saying we do 1 gig files. I definitely wouldn't want to do a 1 gig file in this office, in our office, but 350, 400 is kind of teetering on the size of where the comfort level of how sluggish this model is going to be for everyone. And again, that's because we're only on it up to detailed design, stage 4 Reba, 3-4 Reba, really. So that's that file. And the logos, by the way, when you see a little sheet logo, that's to do with where I'm saying where the sheets are. Okay. Another project. This is the beach promenade in UAE for us as well. 307,000 meter cubed, 425 residential units. You know, it's along 1.5 kilometers of promenade. Again, only up to detailed design. Okay, so bear that in mind. You know, the challenge, the things with this is we often, and because they're residential units or there's repetition, we will split the models up based on how much we can use the models further up and down the building. So, you know, you'll be copying the file maybe 3 times, and then you'll link that into a site model. You might have another couple of different building types all copied in and linked into the site model. All the sheets coming out of the site model. You know, there is things to deal with here, though. I mean, there's things like heights difference. I mean, on this one we kind of got lucky because it's a beach. It's pretty flat. There is changes in topography heights, but not anything out of this world. If you're going to be doing this on campuses where there's lots of different changes and undulations, then you know you want to get that sorted in your head and get the team happy. You know, someone once said to me that on Teams, you're as strong as your weakest link, and that can be very true on projects of this type. That, you know, if you've got one poor guy that's not really that well comfortable in this environment, and the other guys are really good, you're going to have to make sure he doesn't stumble and make mistakes that screw things up for everyone. You know, other things to deal with here is to do with Revit family changing. You know, when I was talking about the LED stuff earlier, I was saying about, you know, residential doors and room properties are important. So, you know, have a think about how you would copy that information across the files and make sure that when you're updating a Revit family, it's happening along other tools and other ways as well, and making sure that everyone knows where they're using the same version, making sure they're not trying to make a slight tweak to one family and one building type without it being aware in the others, especially when it comes to door schedules and stuff like that. How we do? Okay. This is a shell and core building. This is King Abdullah Financial District, parcel 409. It was one that I was heavily involved in. It's a mixed-use project, 2 towers there. It's office, residential and retail podium at the bottom. We went to concept to final design stage 3, which was actually a lot more mature than most of the ones that we do for Middle East. So again, this is a project this was 2009 for our office, so quite a while ago. Some of the stuff that came in the later years of Revit hadn't yet happened, like very decent ways to tag information within links wasn't quite there yet for us with this. We had some real challenges with some of that in terms of linking, in terms of dimensions being lost when someone reloads linked models and stuff like that, and lots of pain. And it's always at the 11th hour, it's always on the deadline day that someone does that sort of thing. You know, facades were a big part of the project. It was the main thing that we needed to do in terms of sheet production. So we focused on that being within separate files, and then the retail mall being in the podium model at the bottom, and that's why it's got its own sheet file. I mean, the paneling as well, you know, wasn't straight away floor to floor. It was across 3 floors because the diamond shapes were in flux. And you know, it was pre-divided patterns in Revit, so it was just your normal curtain panel families we were using. So you know, you had to do some jiggery-pokery to kind of make it look like there was diamond other shapes in there. You can kind of see how we got around it there with some of the panels at the bottom. This is, as you can see, it's nearly finished on site, and it was a good project, but lots of challenges. This is near the O2 Arena. It's an intercontinental hotel. We were the delivery architects, so we came on after most of the design had been kind of addressed. And you know, again, this was a full construction project where we had very much a BIM deliverable in this one to the contractor. So the models did have much more separation going on, and there was also much more information in terms of typical. So what I mean by typical is, you know, if you've got typical floors for a certain residential unit, you're going to be making maybe 3 types. I've shown an example there of 3. It could have been 5 types, and then they've been copied up and down. And then as you make changes, you know, they're shown that way. It's 19 stories and 90-story building with 450 odd, you know, 5-star hotel keys. And the 23-story tower on the side. The other things that were challenging about this, well, not challenging, but were different in terms of the bathroom pods were pretty much built off-site and then brought on-site by the contractor. So again, the model had to kind of allow for that, and we had to kind of think through how it was. You know, there was a lot of generic model kind of input at the beginning to get our heads around that. There's nothing actually wrong with it if it's fit for purpose. And I've no doubt that the conversation, I've sat through many presentations trying to get my head around what was better, groups or links. The groups or links project thing is still very much appropriate and still very much not resolved, okay? 2018, Revit I've seen has made some progress in terms of being able to at least schedule the links. I found personally in a couple of projects in London when we did links for each apartment type, then linked them all in to one file, it became a pain. It became a problem. Views are actually an issue. You know, the weird thing that, and I don't know if they've fixed this in 2018, but in 2017, there was a problem when if you have lots of links, it's actually trying to regenerate the information in the view, even if the link isn't shown in the view. So what I mean by that is that if you've got 30 or 40 apartment blocks all sitting below the level you're cutting, even if you're not actually, your cut plane isn't actually nothing to do with those other links, you've got to switch them off in the view. If not, when you open the view, it hangs while it actually tries to regenerate the fact that there's nothing to show. That was one, and I only found that out through basically going back to support, Autodesk support, and saying, look, we're having a big problem here. You know, what could be the problem? It was one of our first C4R projects as well. So, you know, I was angling it to being a C4R project problem, but in fact it was a Revit file problem in terms of how we were using typicals. The minute we bound the models, it all sped up a lot. So, you know, again, take those things into account. I honestly don't have a feeling of groups or links. I feel like I don't like groups. I never had like groups because they were buggy. But I've found teams teams that are really methodical with groups and are really good and concise and don't let anyone touch their groups other than they do the groups and no one changes the group but them. They've worked all right. I've had no complaints from the PMs on those projects working all right. So I can't say I can't knock them for that. I prefer links personally. Retail projects as well. This is in Melbourne, one of our, it's called Chadstone Shopping Centre. The main focus for this project is built, those aren't renders, they're the actual building done, is the roof. It was a 30-metre high, 7,000 square metre roof. Multidisciplines were involved, you know, university was helping us with it. And the thing I wanted to talk about with these things is that don't always think of it as in terms of the building type either. You know, maybe split the model up based around what you're trying to achieve. The roof is its own file, maybe railings and bulkheads are their own file. They're all linked into a main model. You know, that worked well for us on that project. You know, maybe some people think, well, why railings and bulkheads? Well, again, go back to that thing I talked about in retail malls. There are some projects that are heavily interested in making sure that the railings look very high level quality. You know, the LOD was higher on those things in terms of deliverables. So, you know, just bear those things in mind. And for those wondering if we did the final Revit, if the final Revit facade the facade didn't come out of Revit in the end. Or, sorry, the roof didn't come out of Revit in the end. It was a rhino and grasshopper. Okay. Just a couple of things to consider, and then I wanted to do some questions. These are 2 projects, current at the moment, in the London office. The left-hand side is Brent Cross Shopping Centre. The top is the existing, the bottom is proposed. The other one, I'm sure other people know about, is the O2 Arena. We're kind of in the process of designing and building the inside of a chunk of that pie, you know, about a third of it, if you can think of it that way. And the thing I wanted to cover there is to do with phasing. You know, so there is 2 ways that I find teams use phasing. For anyone that tells you have to do phasing using the phasing tools in Revit, I'd kind of say, you know, fair enough, if that works for you, that's fine. If you're going to commit that your team's happy with that, then that's fine. But there are projects when we prefer to split them up, you know, to have 3 separate files, be it the proposed, have an existing model, and have a demolished model. And as we start demolishing items from the existing, that are going to look different for the proposed, we go down this route. It's an easy way for me to feel comfortable and the teams to feel comfortable about an item having been demolished that shouldn't have been demolished. You know, you have to physically select the object and move it to the other file and delete it in the file you're in. You know, and again, you know, the reason that we're using this, and we're reviewing it for Brent Cross at the moment again, because it's been like this for a while. But the reason it was working out well is that, you know, that building's got to stay open while we build it. So, you know, I am nervous, and there's BIM deliverables, of course. You know, there's a whole requirement with EIRs and, you know, and external parties and information manager and all those sort of things. So, you know, some of it has made me more comfortable to propose to the teams to go down this route. We are potentially going to move down the other route for some aspects or some parts of the building, but it doesn't have to be, you know, I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong, I'm just saying that, you know, think about both, think about what the team you've got on there, think how comfortable do they feel for phasing, how are you going to schedule rooms, how are you going to schedule information, are they going to be remembering to pick the right sort of schedule filters and things like that. Graphically, are you going to be happy with it? You know, those sort of things. Security-sensitive projects. So there's two projects here. One is the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency on the left-hand side in the US, federal agency. And then the other one is the British High Commission in Abuja, Nigeria, both Callison Article projects. Both security-sensitive, both different security requirements. The things to consider here are to do with the fact that typically if it's a security project, it's going to have to sit on its own server. It can't sit within your own servers, depending on how aggressive they need to be. The BIM manager for the UK one is here at the moment, and she didn't have to deal with that stuff, but the other project did. The other thing to deal with that project, with the NGA one specifically, was that the flow of Revit families can only be one directional. Okay, so if you decide to load a family into the project, or if someone decides to, there's no way to get the file back out. They don't allow it, you'll get in big trouble. If you're going to need to make lots of changes to the Revit families, you're going to need to have someone on the project happy to take on content management, happy to take on editing the model in whatever shape or form. The other thing with the security projects is that they own everything, which is why they don't want it to go the other way. So, you know, the Revit families are all theirs. So you have to be aware of that. And when I mean they're all theirs, I don't mean that they built everything for you. It means that they say everything you built is ours, regardless of what you say. And then the last one is to do with fragmented information. Security-sensitive projects have a habit of not showing everyone everything in one sitting. So you're looking at a general arrangements drawing, and there's a good chance you're going to have rooms that you have no idea what they are for, other than it's a square box. There are cultural challenges with those things as well, where they'll tell you to shift things based on changes that are happening globally. How are you going to address that? How are you going to tweak that? So if it's a security project, just bear in mind that with some of the things I covered earlier. Own servers, own permissions, content one way, and bear in mind that you might need to split the model more than you would like. Container models. Now this is something we haven't gone as far as we should do with, and I'd like to go further with it. And I know some very big companies, one very big company I know of that, says that they are adamant they will do one of these in a second, and I'll cover that. And that's, I'll start with the left-hand side first. So, you know, the first one was, and I saw another company doing it earlier, and I thought, fair enough, another company that's doing this, is, yeah, everything modeled in other files. The main Revit file has no modeling of any sort in it. It's just a container model with the sheets. Tagging's done in there, dimensioning's done in there. That's fine. That works. It's good in a lot of ways. There's a lot of pros to that, absolutely. The one thing that we often, people don't like too much is grid bubbles, level markers, not having full control over. Yes, you can copy monitor them in, of course, and massage them there to graphically represent what you want. Grid bubbles the same. Obviously, if you've got elevations, you don't want the grid bubbles going all the way through, or the lines going all the way through. Yeah, you can copy monitor, but then be prepared to have that monitoring needed. You know, how comfortable does the team feel with that? If they feel comfortable, tick. You know, that's the job. All Revit families in one model. You know, there are teams that I know of that like to have a blank Revit file with all the families loaded into it. You can very clearly see how line weights look, very clearly see what you're going to see through the different medium, coarse and fine level of detail. Scales, you can start managing your scale views as well, so you can start seeing what's going to pop up and what's not going to. The bad thing with it is, everyone's got to remember to load it back in there. So if you're going to make a tweak, if someone on the project goes, yeah, but I want to just make one slight C drive, one little change, and I'm going to put it on my desktop for a minute, they better remember to put it in here, because if they don't, someone else isn't going to know, and they're going to push it back one day maybe to the project and redefine anything you've already done. So again, it comes down to workflows. It comes down to how comfortable people feel, but there's a lot of pros to that sort of stuff. Other areas that people are doing, and I really like this one, I'm really thinking how we can do this one, is to do with CAD files all in a separate model. There are teams I know that keep no CAD files in any of their Revit files other than having a separate Revit file with nothing in it but the CAD files. Why would you do that? Well, I mean, there's a lot of pros to it. It means that you can always find where all the CAD files are. You can see where they've been stacked up. You can have that file linked into all the other models if there's lots of models using the same CAD files. And at least then when you need to make a change to one, you can make a change across all of them, There's a lot of good things that come with that. But again, it comes down to sheet management, people making sure they're using view templates appropriately, the model is linked in appropriately as well, but I like it. I personally would go with that. And so we're actually doing not too bad. So I'm allowed sort of 15 minutes for questions, so we're going to be doing all right here. And I just wanted to finish on saying, this is an Arcadis project that, Callis and Articales have luckily been involved in as well. It's the Dubai Creek Harbour in the UAE. It's probably one of the biggest projects going on out there. Obviously, we're not doing the Calatrava Tower. We're doing the buildings that are surrounding it. Residential, 450, I'll throw some numbers, 450,000 metre cubed of gross floor area, retail of 385,000 metre cubed. The scale of these projects doesn't scare me one bit. As long as you work out and craft out the concepts based on some of the stuff we covered earlier, doesn't matter which one you choose, as long as you choose the appropriate one for your need, then it can be achieved. There's no reason why you can't. So, a project of that you can see like there, it doesn't worry me. It's just about carving it up, breaking it down, getting some logic into it, and then just applying that same process to all the other elements and all the other buildings. And that includes the distributed teams things that we were talking about earlier. So with that, we're kind of done. So I just wanted to see if there was any questions about the sort of stuff I covered. Don't be shy, there's no wrong answers, I promise.
What's the main reason why you don't use container models?
Main reason we haven't used container models? Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we haven't stopped for a second to think it through properly. I actually do like it. Some of the teams don't like the container model in terms of the links of 3D information and then sheets all in one, mainly to do with grid bubbles and level markers and annotations on sections and elevations and cuts and detail components they might draw on top. If they're happy to not have a little bit more jinking to have to do with that, then there's nothing wrong with other. That's only really in the last 2 or 3 years got better, because it was a lot harder years ago with that stuff. So, just bear that in mind. Any other questions?
I noticed you had them up there as a little logo at the beginning. What's your take on your CDE? You haven't really talked about a common data environment. I know you put Nuforma up at the beginning, and then you were talking about BIM 360 later on. Do you use one or the other, or both, or is it project specific?
Okay. I'll try not giving you the political answer. I can see someone looking at me that is going to be very interested in what I say here. Our common data environment is going to be BIM 360, have no doubt. We have been using Nuforma through the years, and it has had a lot of stuff that has been really helpful to us. But and the one caveat I will say is that Nuforma really still has a place for us at the moment in terms of email archiving and email management. And I do speak to the BIM 360 product team all the way up to the top, luckily, and they know that I'm trying to get my head around, well, what will that ecosystem look like? So our common data environment will be the BIM 360 family, have no doubt. I mean, it's going to take away a lot of those challenges in terms of distributed teams, but we're not there yet for some offices. New Forma has definitely still got its place at the moment.
I suppose that BIM 360 will have some limitations with the PAS 1192 when you have to do model validation before sharing and all this.
Correct, yeah. So we're going to rely on 360 docs, obviously, which is why we're doing it as a slower process. We're at the stage in Lighthouse projects. We're picking for BIM 360 docs, where we're picking the right sort of project to put on there that isn't needing full PAS 1192 alignment. Also, with the UK projects, we still need to get our head round if we are going to go for a government project, how comfortable do they feel with data servers that aren't in the UK? Because BIM 360 isn't yet in the UK, the data servers. So as long as you can get sign-off on that, then you could go down that route. But we're not at the moment at that stage for that tool. It's still got a long way, docs, to go. They know that I know. I feel that way.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah?
Just thinking about BS 1192 within the UK and the naming structures for files.
Sure.
What way are you, or maybe you're not having to at the moment, but are you using something like the zone for your different models, or are you using the number on the end for your different models?
We're using, so Brent Cross Shopping Centre is having to fully align to BS 1192. We're using zones for that. We managed to, well, I say we're fully compliant. We've managed to sneak in an extra couple of digits for drawing numbering to address some of the ways that we work with things. But the zoning is being used based around the naming convention.
So you would see the zone as being the separate model entities themselves?
Yes.
That's how you're
that's what we've done.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what we've had to do for that project. Yeah.
There was a question about, you talk about groups and you also talk about linked files.
Okay.
And then I just want to know which one you favor most, because yesterday there was a presentation about models going to the fabrication stage, and he favors the linking the 400-odd files, but controlling them by work stages or work sets. So just your thoughts on that.
Okay, so links, so work sets more, or so
Yeah.
okay. So I'll talk about work sets very briefly. So that that model, that team I told you about managing the 1 gig models, they use specify work sets when opening the models, so that they can get more control over. Which is why they say it works well for them, because they're not seeing always the whole building in one hit. I personally, maybe it's a safe conscious thing, like a safety thing, but a safety net is the word I'm looking for. I use links, or I prefer teams to use links, because then at least it's much easier for me to help them check what's in the file. If I right-click on a group and say save as link and then take it out, it doesn't always look like what the group does in the file I'm in. And teams often aren't checking that thing at the top, and I can't remember the exact word now, but there's a thing at the top that tells you a group isn't the same as the other groups. That bothers me, because not everyone is looking at that button or even caring about what that button is trying to tell them. So for that, I prefer links. But it does mean that when someone cuts a section through a 25-story tower and you've got all these linked apartment blocks in there, you've got all these level markers turning up, you've got maybe grid bubbles turning up where you don't want them to be. So that, if people want to then tweak and make changes to the filled regions, maybe the graphical look of the cut of the section isn't quite right. But there is pain to that isn't something that you would get in groups, frankly. So. Anyone else? All right. I know. Okay. Okay, so Dynamo in Calais-Artikel, we're using it mostly in the US. The UK office is trying to get their heads around it. Mostly for sheet production in the UK, we're trying to get our head around it, making changes to sheets and things like that. In terms of the US, there's a real mix. So some of them are using it to... The main one is where we need to show in the same properties of an area, we need to show net usable areas versus gross areas of a room. We're using Dynamo to get it to read the area schedules to populate the room schedule as a piece of text in there so that then we can export out that whole thing. And it's also getting used to add information that we're then going to use in Navisworks as for selection sets in Navisworks. So that's the kind of main ways. But I saw another company doing some pretty cool stuff with wall penetrations earlier to be used using Dynamo, and I thought that was great. But we definitely need to go much further with Dynamo. I think the thing for our company is we've been really a lot into Grasshopper, so it's having to teach the guys that were Grasshopper guys to start going into the Dynamo world. But luckily within the larger, broad Arcadis, we're kind of tapping into some of their knowledge with that stuff as well.
I know that we've spoken about collaboration for Revit and that everything's live and you can't really control what people see and what they don't see. For the projects that we have used in the office that have worked, what's been the best kind of system that you've employed for managing that in terms of working with engineers and so on?
Okay, so there's a couple. So one of the ways is we have a collaboration for Revit project for each of the different disciplines. So there's technically 3 projects in there, and then when they're happy to share it with us, they will copy the file from one hub to another hub, and it's a lot quicker because sometimes it's download upload. It depends on what they're doing, how they've managed it themselves. But so the one way is across the hubs, across the projects within the same hub. And then the other way is by, sadly, file naming is another one. Every week the team will download, or the MEP or structure guy will download the model, rename it to the latest Friday date, and then re-upload it to the project so that we know to then go manage links, reload from, and pick a different file. The bad thing with that, and I don't know for those that use collaboration for Revit, if you're using BIM 360 Team and you get all your nice folders set up for projects, Revit, you can forget it. It sees everything in one file, one folder. So file naming becomes really, really important because when you go into Revit in C4R and you go file open in C4R, they won't see any folders. They'll just see the whole list of all files in there, which means that you have to be really good at file naming.
Sorry, I have a question around the same thing. You said create 3 projects, which is 1 architecture, 1 mechanical, 1 structure. And then where are we federating the model?
We're then asking them to copy the files every week when they're happy to share it. They copy the file and put it in the other 2 model files and in the other locations. Now, there's 2 ways that they have to do that. One is if they download and then re-upload to theirs so they can see it, they can copy it like literally by 2-second thing by just going copy because it's in the same cloud kind of hub. If they're wanting to publish to another project, we're asking them to download a copy for themselves and then they can move the file itself to a different hub. So yeah, I'm happy to chat to you about later. All right, I think that's it. Yeah, thank you everyone.